She was born into a silence that felt older than the house itself, a silence that carried expectations, disappointment, and unspoken judgments. Her arrival did not bring celebration. It brought calculation. The first thing noticed about her was not her cry or her breath, but the shade of her skin. And that single observation quietly rewrote the way the world would treat her from that moment on. Her mother held her with arms that were careful, not warm. Her father looked at her with a distance that felt intentional, as if love were something to be earned later. If at all, she grew up sensing that she was a question no one wanted to answer. The house taught her early lessons that affection could be withheld without explanation, that approval came with conditions, that being present did not guarantee being valued. She learned to move softly, to speak less, to observe more, because attention often came with pain. Her childhood was not loud with violence. It was quiet with neglect, and that kind of quiet seeps deeper. It teaches a child to doubt their worth, without anyone ever saying the words out loud. Every mirror became a reminder that she did not match the image of what was considered beautiful, acceptable, worthy. She did not hate her reflection. At first, she was taught to by the glances, by the jokes, by the comparisons whispered just loudly enough to be heard. She learned that love could be selective, and she was not the selection. School did not offer escape. It only expanded the stage hallways, echoed with laughter that cut sharper than insults. Teachers praised others while overlooking her effort. Classmates reduced her identity to color, to background, to stereotype. She learned to sit in the back, to raise her hand less, to swallow answers she knew were right, because being right did not always protect you. She walked home alone most days, replaying moments, wondering what she could have done differently to be seen differently. She tried being quieter, kinder, smarter, invisible. None of it changed the outcome. Rejection followed her like a shadow that never tired. Yet even in those years, something inside her resisted erasure. She did not yet have language for it, but she felt it, a subtle defiance, a refusal to fully disappear. She would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, imagining a future that felt unreal. A version of herself that stood tall, spoke freely, existed without apology. Those visions were fragile, but they were hers, and she guarded them closely because hope in an unkind world must be protected to survive. As she grew older, the gap between who she was and who the world allowed her to be widened. Responsibility came early. She worked small jobs, balancing survival with expectation. Every earned coin felt like proof that she was capable, even when no one acknowledged it. She watched others receive guidance, support, encouragement, while she learned everything the hard way, trial, error, exhaustion. She carried the weight of adulthood before her time, not because she wanted to, but because no one else would carry it for her. She made mistakes like anyone else, but hers were remembered longer, judged harsher. She noticed how forgiveness was distributed unevenly, how some were allowed to fail publicly and recover while others were expected to be flawless just to be tolerated. She felt the pressure to represent more than herself, to be careful not to confirm stereotypes placed on her shoulders before she even understood them. That pressure was heavy, but it shaped her awareness. She began to see patterns, systems, invisible walls that explained why effort alone was not always enough. Understanding this did not make her bitter. It made her focused, because once you see the rules, you stop blaming yourself for not winning a rigged game. Words became her refuge. She did not plan it. It happened naturally. She started writing late at night when the world was quiet and no one was watching. She wrote not to be read, but to breathe every sentence, release something she'd been holding. Every paragraph felt like reclaiming space that had been taken from her. She wrote about pain, but also about resilience, about women erased and voices silenced, about the quiet strength of those who survive without recognition. Her writing did not ask for sympathy. It demanded truth through words. She began to understand herself, her anger, her sadness, her longing. She realized she was not broken. She was responding normally to an abnormal amount of rejection. That realization changed something fundamental inside her. Shame loosened its grip. She began to see her story not as a failure, but as evidence of endurance. The world outside remained unchanged, but her internal landscape shifted. She started showing up shoulders, a little straighter voice, a little steadier. She did not become fearless. She became intentional. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled every decision she took. Small risks spoke when she would have stayed silent before applied for opportunities she once believed were not meant for people like her. Rejection still came, but it no longer defined her, because she had already faced the worst form of rejection from those closest to her, and survived. She learned that resilience is built quietly in moments. No one applauds when you choose to continue despite exhaustion. When you believe in yourself before anyone else does, those moments stack, slowly forming a foundation she could stand on. Her relationship with her family remained complicated. Love existed, but it was distant, filtered through expectation and comparison. She stopped chasing approval. She realized that some people are limited by what they were taught, and breaking those limitations was not her responsibility. Acceptance did not come all at once. It arrived gradually through boundaries, through understanding, through choosing peace over validation. She mourned the version of love she wished she had, but she stopped letting that absence dictate her future. Grief and growth coexisted within her, and that balance made her stronger. She learned that healing is not about forgetting, it is about remembering without bleeding. Opportunity eventually found her, not because the world suddenly became fair, but because she had prepared herself to recognize it. When it appeared, it was small at first, unremarkable to others, but monumental to her. She stepped into spaces where she was not expected to excel, and did anyway, not perfectly, but persistently. She listened, learned, adapted. She brought her full self into rooms that once intimidated her, and discovered that her perspective was not a weakness, it was an asset. Her experiences gave her insight, empathy, clarity. She could see what others overlooked, feel what others dismissed. That depth translated into leadership even before she realized she was leading. People began to listen, not out of obligation, but because her words resonated. They felt familiar, honest, necessary. Still, doubt followed success, quietly questioning whether she deserved the progress, whether it would last. Imposter syndrome whispered that she was one mistake away from being exposed. She acknowledged the voice but did not obey it. She reminded herself of every night she survived, every obstacle she navigated, every reason she had earned her place. Confidence did not come from praise. It came from memory, from evidence, from knowing how much she had endured to stand where she was standing. The girl who once wished to disappear was learning how to take up space, not aggressively, not arrogantly, but unapologetically. As her presence grew, so did resistance. People are comfortable with struggle. They are uncomfortable with transformation, especially when it comes from those they underestimated. She faced criticism, dismissal, attempts to reduce her to anger or exception. She refused both. She was not angry. She was honest, and she was not an exception. She was evidence that talent exists everywhere. Opportunity does not. She continued anyway, knowing that discomfort often signals necessary change. Her story was no longer just hers. It was becoming a mirror for others who had felt invisible, unheard, underestimated, and that realization added weight to her steps. She was no longer walking only for herself. She was walking for every version of her that had been told to shrink. By the end of this chapter, she was not fully free, not fully celebrated, not finished, but she was awake. She knew who she was, and more importantly, who she was not. She was not the labels placed on her, not the limitations assigned to her, not the rejection she endured. She was becoming something deliberate, something powerful, something unignorable. And though the world did not yet fully recognize it, the ground beneath her was already shifting. Her rise had begun quietly, steadily, and nothing would stop it now. As she stepped deeper into a world that had never been designed with her in mind, she learned quickly that progress was not linear. It came in waves. Some days felt like flight, others like sinking, but she stopped confusing struggle with failure. She understood now that resistance often appears right before transformation. The more visible she became, the more the world tested her resolve. She walked into rooms where conversations paused, where eyes measured her presence before acknowledging her competence. And instead of shrinking, she grounded herself in the truth of her preparation. She had earned every step even if no one had opened the door for her. She had built her own entrance through consistency, discipline, and an unrelenting refusal to disappear. She listened carefully, not just to words, but to what was left unsaid, learning how power moved, how decisions were made, how silence could be strategic, and how voice could be dangerous when it challenged comfort. Her work demanded more from her than she had ever given before. Long hours, emotional labor, constant self-evaluation. She was expected to represent resilience without fatigue, strength without vulnerability, excellence without error. And she carried that weight while still healing wounds no one could see. There were nights when exhaustion pressed heavy on her chest, when she questioned whether the cost was too high, whether peace might exist in anonymity. But every time she imagined stepping back, she remembered the girl. She used to be the one who prayed for an opening, any opening. And she kept going, not because it was easy, but because quitting would mean betraying every version of herself that survived to reach this moment. The writing that once lived only in private notebooks began to find its way into the world. First cautiously, then with growing confidence, she shared her words in spaces that were not always welcoming, but undeniably listening. Her voice carried a resonance shaped by lived experience. It did not ask for permission. It invited reflection. Some people leaned in, others pushed back. But indifference was no longer an option. Her truth stirred something uncomfortable. Necessary conversations were sparked, defenses were raised, and slowly perspectives shifted. She realized that impact does not always look like agreement. Sometimes it looks like disruption, and she was no longer afraid of disrupting narratives that had erased people like her for generations. With visibility came scrutiny. Her path was examined, her tone questioned, her motives dissected. She was told to soften her message to be more agreeable, to make it easier for others to digest, but she refused to dilute her truth. She had learned that palatability often comes at the cost of authenticity, and she had spent too long fighting to be heard to now silence herself for comfort. She chose integrity even when it isolated her, even when it slowed her progress, even when it invited criticism, because she understood that leadership rooted in truth lasts longer than approval built on compromise. She began forming connections with others who recognized her strength not as a threat but as an asset. Collaborations emerged grounded in mutual respect, shared vision, and collective healing. She learned that community is not found. It is built through trust, vulnerability, and shared purpose together. They created spaces where voices once dismissed were centered, where stories once hidden were amplified, where power was redistributed through empathy and action. She watched women like herself step into confidence, inspired not by perfection, but by possibility. And she understood that her journey was no longer solitary. It was part of something larger, a movement shaped by countless lives, intersecting in pursuit of dignity and justice. Despite the progress, doubt still visited, often uninvited. It arrived quietly, questioning her worth, her stamina, her belonging. She did not fight it aggressively. She acknowledged it, sat with it, learned from it, then let it pass. She discovered that doubt loses power when it is not feared, when it is met with evidence, with memory, with self-compassion. She reminded herself of the obstacles she had already overcome, of the skills she had cultivated, of the resilience she carried. She learned that confidence is not the absence of uncertainty, but the decision to move forward regardless. Her family watched her transformation with mixed emotions: pride, confusion, discomfort. The dynamic shifted, roles reversed, expectations challenged. She no longer sought their validation, but she offered understanding, recognizing that growth can be threatening to those who have not yet healed their own limitations. Boundaries became necessary. Conversations became honest. Peace. Acceptance did not require agreement. It required self-respect, and she finally possessed that in abundance. As opportunities expanded, so did responsibility. She was invited to speak, to lead, to advise, to influence policies, narratives. Minds, she approached each platform with intention, aware of the power of representation, aware of the weight of expectation. She spoke not as an exception, but as a reflection of countless untold stories. She highlighted systemic barriers. Without centering herself as a solution, she advocated for equity without seeking personal praise. She understood that true impact is measured not by visibility, but by change, and she committed herself to creating pathways wider than the ones she walked. Resistance intensified predictably. There were attempts to discredit her, to minimize her achievements, to frame her success as anomaly or agenda. She met these challenges with calm clarity, refusing to be distracted by noise. She focused on work, on community, on sustainability. She knew that longevity required balance, that burnout would not serve her purpose. She learned to rest without guilt, to ask for help, without shame, to protect her spirit as fiercely as she protected her mission. Self-care was no longer indulgence. It was strategy survival for the long journey ahead. In moments of quiet, she reflected on how far she had come from the girl who once avoided mirrors, avoided attention, avoided hope. She saw now that every painful chapter had equipped her with insight, compassion, and strength. She did not romanticize suffering, but she honored its role in shaping her resilience. She forgave herself for past doubts, for moments of hesitation, for believing she was less than. She embraced her complexity, her softness, her fire understanding, that both were necessary for the work she was doing. Her presence continued to reshape spaces, conversations, shifted policies, reconsidered narratives, expanded. She did not witness every impact directly, but she felt the ripple effects in messages from strangers, in changed attitudes, in opportunities created for others. She realized that legacy is built quietly through consistent action, through integrity maintained when no one is watching. She was no longer chasing recognition. She was cultivating transformation, and that focus anchored her through uncertainty. By the close of this chapter, she stood firmly in her purpose, not because the journey was complete, but because her direction was clear. She had learned to navigate adversity without losing herself, to lead without domination, to speak without erasing others. The world had not suddenly become fair, but she had become formidable, equipped with vision, resilience, and unwavering self-belief. Her rise was no longer a question. It was a process unfolding with intention, and the foundation she was laying would support everything still to come.